need to have my amendment. How do you feel? I don't know. I need to know.
Okay, Mr. Chair, council members and participants, we're now live.
Thank you, Modesto. Good afternoon. This is the Council Committee on Finance for today, Monday, November 9th. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We're using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Philadelphia Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to these hearings. It can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I know that the hour has come, and Mr. Iannuzzi, if you could please take the roll, call the roll to take attendance for members of this committee. Members, please indicate that you are present when your name is called, and please offer a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Cindy Bass.
I am present. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for hosting this meeting today.
Councilmember Alan Dom.
Good. I guess it's still good afternoon, Chairman Green and colleagues. Hope everyone's well. Thank you.
Councilmember Helen Gim.
Present. Good afternoon, everybody.
Councilmember Bobby Heenan.
Good afternoon, Chairman and colleagues. I am present.
Councilmember Curtis Jones Jr. Councilmember Sherelle Parker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Maria Quinones Sanchez.
Good afternoon, Chairman Green and colleagues and all the folks participating.
And Chair Derek Green.
Present. Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. A quorum of this committee is present and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Finance regarding bill numbers 200387, 200599, and 200600. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please read the titles of these bills?
Frank, before you start, this is Councilmember Squilla. Just want to be, for the record, recorded as present.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'll add you to the roll. Mr. Chair, I'll read the bills now. Bill number 200387, an ordinance amending the Philadelphia Code to add a new section entitled Good Parking Jobs for Philadelphia Review Committee to provide for the creation of an advisory body to consider the quality of jobs and opportunities for workers in the parking industry and the potential to make adjustments to the parking tax, including with respect to the goal of reducing the parking tax to 17% by July 1st, 2022, based on a review of the working conditions in the parking industry and to provide reports related thereto, all under certain terms and conditions. Bill number 200599, an ordinance constituting the 25th Supplemental Ordinance to the Restated General Water and Wastewater Revenue Bond Ordinance of 1989, as supplemented, authorizing the bond committee to issue and sell one or more series or subseries of tax-exempt or taxable water and wastewater revenue bonds and revenue refunding bonds, some or all of which may be used for the implementation of a revolving commercial paper program for the system. Bill number 200600, an ordinance constituting 24th Supplemental Ordinance to the Restated General Water and Wastewater Revenue Bond Ordinance of 1989, as supplemented, authorizing the bond committee to issue and sell one or more series or subseries of tax-exempt or taxable water and wastewater revenue bonds and revenue refunding bonds.
Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have here for today, Everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public meeting is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers should have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for any questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will use the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used by members for this purpose. Before we call the first panel, would any members of this committee like to make any opening comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sherelle Parker.
Please proceed, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. In the spring of 2019, I introduced 2 bills to protect workers in the parking industry. One bill had to do with just cause, meaning the termination of employees, and the other bill was concerned with safe staffing of parking lots and garages. When the bills were heard in the Labor and Civil Service Committee in May of 2019, I acknowledged that the industry itself is one of the highest taxed industries in the city of Philadelphia. I also, Mr. Chairman, publicly committed at that time to working to find a way forward in getting the parking tax rate lowered in the city of Philadelphia. Unfortunately, since early 2020, the world as we know it has been upended. And our city's restaurants, hotels, and retail stores have been hit hard by COVID and its economic fallout. Related to the parking industry, it has also been hit hard, very hard. After all, not only are there fewer people from the suburbs and tourists coming into the city to eat, sleep, and shop, but there are also thousands upon thousands of office workers who are no longer driving into the city every day to go to work. On top of this, we know that Mayor Kinney proposed and our city council adopted an increase to the parking tax rate for this fiscal year, an increase that took the rate from 22.5% to 25%. Now, despite raising the tax rate, which would theoretically assist with bringing in more tax revenue, the year-to-date parking tax revenues as of September 2020 are down by 64.1%. So we say this another way, by September 2019, the parking tax rate had brought in about $24.5 million for that fiscal year thus far. But in September 2020, the parking tax rate had only brought in $8,820,000 this fiscal year thus far. Now, I don't want to get too in-depth relative to the conversation about the elasticity of the city's parking tax, but it literally is worth stating that we may be reaching a point where the city's parking industry is facing an existential threat, and its high tax rate definitely isn't helping. Now, for those who are asking themselves, why should I care about the parking industry? I don't even drive a car, or when I do, I park on the street. Plus, you know, the majority of people who pay the parking tax rate, they aren't even Philadelphians. Well, I want to push back on that frame of thinking, and I want to argue that we must care about the parking industry because it employs over 1,000 Philadelphians, many of whom are minority residents or new immigrants in our city. These are Philadelphians who are just trying to earn a decent living and work toward their vision of the American dream. If the parking industry stops to exist, then these jobs stop to exist as well. So it was because of this dilemma that this past spring, as part of the budget negotiations, I introduced bill number 200387. The bill in itself creates a good parking jobs for Philadelphia Review Committee, which will be an advisory body that will consider the quality of jobs and opportunities for workers in the parking industry and the potential to make adjustments to the parking tax, including with respect to the goal of reducing the parking tax to 17% by July 1st, 2022. We know that is the start of fiscal year 2023. The 7 members of the review committee will be appointed by the mayor. They will consist of 2 members from the labor community, 2 members from the parking industry, 1 representative from the city administration, and 2 members from city council. The review committee is tasked with 2 important action items. The first is it shall make a thorough review of the working conditions in the parking industry, including job standards, efforts to reduce worker turnover, the extent of employer-provided training and safety, and opportunities for advancement. Second, the committee shall evaluate the economics of the parking industry with respect to the parking tax rate. And before we hear testimony on bill number 200387, I want to note that this legislation is both pro-business and pro-worker, meaning that just because one is being pro-worker doesn't mean that we have to be, as a city, anti-business. And if we're being pro-business, that doesn't mean we're being anti-worker. What we attempted to show is that it's not either or, but when those 2 aspects of our economy and our city work together, good things can happen. So often we hear of legislative initiatives or policies that are pitting business versus worker. But in this case, this bill acknowledges that in order for the parking industry to succeed, its workers must succeed. And in order for parking workers to succeed, the industry must succeed. We on council understand that at some point, trying to get more revenue from the parking industry will be like trying to get blood from a stone. Trying to get more revenue from the parking industry will be like trying to get blood from a stone. And I, along with all of my colleagues, we understand that in order for parking workers to succeed, we can't tax the parking industry into oblivion. And at the same time, we want to ensure that the industry across the board is treating parking workers with respect and dignity. The good parking jobs for Philadelphia Review Committee will be a step in the right direction. I want to thank the industry in and of itself, along with the workers in the industry, for doing what no one expects us to be able to do in the city of Philadelphia, is to be able to sit down at a table, hammer out a compromise that could be reached in the best interest of all parties. So Chairman Green, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity along with members of the committee, and I look forward to hearing the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker, for your comments and your work on this issue. At this point, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Dom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to support Councilmember Parker's comments on this. And while I'll be recusing myself from the vote, I just want to share some facts that all of us should be aware of at this time. Presently, between 85 and 90% of the offices in the core of our city are unoccupied, empty. 10 to 15% of the workers are there, which means, of course, there's less people parking, there's less people shopping, there's less people doing everything. So whatever we can do as a body to help our economy, our local economy, I would love for us to do it. So I won't be voting on this issue. I'm going to recuse myself, but I want to just pass on that in every area of business right now, we need to help as much as we possibly can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Dom. Seeing no other comments by members of the committee, at this point, we will move into the testimony for the first panel for the bill that's slated for this afternoon's Finance Committee hearing. Mr. Iannuzzi, if you could call the first panel of witnesses we have to testify this afternoon.
Jackie Dunn, Acting Treasurer of the City of Philadelphia.
Good afternoon, Ms. Dunn. Are you ready to proceed? Please make sure you state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Thank you. I am. Good afternoon, Chair Green and members of the Finance Committee. My name is Jackie Dunn, Acting City Treasurer. With me virtually is Melissa Labuda, Deputy Water Commissioner, and I'm here to testify today on behalf of Bills 200599 and 200600. Bill 200599 would provide authorization to create a commercial paper program for the Water Department. The requested program size is $400 million, which approximates the size of the Water Department's FY20 capital program. Commercial paper can be used as a flexible financing tool to fund capital projects on an interim basis, used incrementally and up to the approved program size. The commercial paper would later be defeased with long-term financing when the projects are completed. The Water Department can also use this program to take advantage of low-cost state and federal loan programs that work on a reimbursement basis. Commercial paper has maturities of up to 270 days and is backed by a letter of credit. Similar programs are currently in place for the Division of Aviation and the Gas Works. Bill 200600 would provide authorization to issue up to $400 million of water and wastewater revenue bonds, as well as provide future refunding authorization for such bonds. Such bonds would fund capital improvements to the water system that are authorized and included in the city's capital budget, as well as the defeasance of any obligations issued through the proposed commercial paper program. The administration supports both bills and respectfully requests that the committee report them with a favorable recommendation and a suspension of the rules as to permit first reading at the next session of council. Thank you for your consideration and the opportunity to testify. I am happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn, for your testimony. And just wanted to provide a little more context to one of the bills, the first bill regarding commercial paper program. This was a program that, from my recollection, the city had not used in the past, but more recently did use a commercial paper program or CP program during the time period that this body and the city was deliberating on the sale of PGW. Because we could not go to traditional markets because of all of the dynamics of the possible sale of Philadelphia Gas Works. Actually then, Rashida Johnson, before she became a city treasurer when she was in the private sector, has suggested a commercial paper program that could be used by the Philadelphia Gas Works as a way of doing short-term financing to do some of the things they need to do. My recollection also suggests that it was the airport following PGW that also used a commercial paper program because the airport at that point was looking at some financing in regarding to the passenger and customer facility charges in reference to the runway extension. And so that is some context of the commercial paper program as a short-term financing vehicle that I think has provided a lot of benefit for the city to allow us to access markets and do some borrowing in a very short period of time, and then can be stretched out over a longer financing period in the future. So for the CP program that you're contemplating now, can you give some perspective of how those dollars will be used?
Absolutely, and thank you for the additional context, Chair Green. That's correct. The GasWorks program was implemented first, and that's about $120 million in size. And the airport program followed suit and is now about $350 million in size. And so the water program, if passed, would be about $400 million and structured similarly to what the airport has in place, where it's backed by one or more letters of credit. And as we talked about, it can be used really as an additional short-term financing tool. I think what is particularly attractive, and I'll let the Deputy Commissioner at the Water Department add any additional context if she'd like, but particularly to take advantage of the state and federal low-cost loan programs. So the Water Department currently received $73 million approval in state funding from the PennVents loan program. And there is also a program for water infrastructure financing at the federal level called WIFIA, where they offer very low rates, lower than what we could achieve in the markets, but they work on a reimbursement basis. And so to be able to utilize the commercial paper to demonstrate spending, to then receive reimbursement through those state and federal programs could certainly be very attractive for the city and for the water department.
Thank you for that background. I know Councilmember O'Neill's not here, but I know over the years he talked about and has talked about how the city could be taking better advantage of the PennVest program. I think by having this commercial paper or CP program will allow us to take advantage of this statewide program. It's been used by cities of smaller sizes, but I think this is an opportunity for us to better maximize that program for the benefit of the water department.
Absolutely.
Are there additional questions for Ms. Dunn on either of these two bills? I know, Ms. Dunn, you stated that we also have another person here from the water department. Not sure if they wanted to provide any additional context to what was already provided. I do see Councilmember Kim does have a question she would like to ask.
Yes, sorry. Good afternoon. I wanted to ask what the city's estimated tax, what the total amount would be to change it from 25% to the proposed rate of 17%.
I'm sorry, I don't understand
the annual amount of money that the city would. How much less would the city receive annually from a 25% to 17%?
Excuse me, Councilwoman Gim. Point of information. This is Councilwoman Parker. Councilwoman, I think your question is for the next bill that will come up relative to the Good Parking Jobs Committee, and so that would be for the panel on the other bill.
Okay, I'm happy to wait.
Okay. So, Ms. Dunn, if I don't see any other questions from members of the council, I do have a few additional questions in reference
Council Chair, this is Councilwoman Sanchez. I did put up for a question to the Water Department.
I'm sorry, I do see your hand raised. Okay, is this for Ms. Dunn or for the Water Department?
Or maybe she can answer it.
Okay, please proceed with your question, and then I have some follow-up questions I will ask after you wrap up if no other members have any additional questions for panel number one.
Yes, notwithstanding the good rate of this water department opportunity, why are we borrowing money at this particular time as opposed to using some of the stabilization fund and some of the other stuff? I mean, what in particular around this loan particular package that we have to take it now?
Sure.
Jacqueline, would you like me to answer this question?
Sure. Go ahead, Misty. Thank you.
So this is Melissa Liverwood. I'm the Deputy Commissioner. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. So the department has used its operating reserves to bridge some of its financial challenges in fiscal year 20. We anticipate continuing to use those reserves like the rate stabilization fund in fiscal year 21. So you can't count the same money twice. So they're not readily available to support the commercial paper program.
So what would be the difference? How are we going to make up this particular loan? Is this going to be from additional water fees, storm water fees? How are we going to pay for this in particular?
So the only way this will proceed is if the department has revenues to support the debt service on the loan, which would require the department to cut further its operating budget and seek new rate cases in the future.
And that's my concern, because we have money on hand, additional borrowing that could potentially increase rate, because we've had this rate debate. And again, with the storm water fees, that's why I'm asking, does the pros, weigh out the cons around how this will impact water fees? We're in the process of considering the forgivable loan piece of it, which again goes with around rate increases. So that's why I'm asking, why now, right now at this time?
The city must invest in its aging infrastructure. The PEMVEST application process is extensive and complicated. We actually began this application several months ago prior to the pandemic. We received the award probably in April. So this critical infrastructure project is needed to support critical services to the city of Philadelphia. Water supply is a critical service. This low-cost program has the least impact on the rate base because the funding is below 2%.
I will quote you on that when we go to the ratepayers increase, but I appreciate the fact that, I understand it's a low interest and I know this is very competitive, but as you all know, the water fee structure in the city of Philadelphia is one of the issues that we have when we talk about cost burdening folks. So it's a conversation we'll continue to have, but I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just if I could follow up on the questions asked by Councilmember Sanchez, Ms. Dunn and Ms. Labuda. From my recollection, when we did both the CP program for airport and also for gasworks, that was because we could not go to the traditional markets to do our traditional capital borrowing. So we were basically using what dollars that would have been committed for capital borrowing for another type of borrowing, which was a commercial paper program. So it wasn't trying to borrow additional money. It was using what would have been dollars we would have gone through a traditional bond process to provide that borrowing, just using a different vehicle, that being short term. Can you provide some background in that regard that maybe addresses some of the concerns that Councilmember Sanchez raised about additional borrowing as opposed to replacing the type of borrowing?
Yes, thank you, Chair Green. As you recall, in the gasworks case, the structure of the program, I think, was advantageous given their inability to access the market at that time. I think airport had some additional options, but this is a tool that allows them to be more strategic and try and seek the lowest rates possible to make any type of critical infrastructure investments that they need to make. And I think that is the similar case with water. This really allows us to go after the lowest cost of capital, to be more strategic in the size of borrowing, to be more strategic in when we can borrow. The commercial paper program is much more flexible and allows us to be more nimble than what we can do through a traditional financing.
And so what the water department would have traditionally done from a borrowing at this time, that would have been based on funds from debt service payments that we would be making. Are we talking about an additional amount of debt service payments, or we're still using the same kind of resources that would be allocated, but using that for commercial paper, which is a short-term borrowing, as opposed to the more traditional borrowing, which is longer term, but still using the same type of resources that would be dedicated for our traditional borrowing?
Sure. This is an additional tool for water. And so as Deputy Commissioner Labuda stated, the commercial paper or traditional bonds both count towards any debt service coverage requirements, for example. So they need to demonstrate that they have appropriate coverage. We would want to make sure that that was in line with their current ratio. We want to make sure that that is something that the rating agencies are comfortable with, for example. And so this is really a different type of tool that allows them to better manage such costs. And I'll let Commissioner Labuda add any additional context if she has any.
Thank you, Jackie. You covered it. I appreciate it.
Okay. Councilmember Gim, I think you have a question.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that the treasurer could stay on for the next panel since I know they're not listed for it.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Some other additional questions I had, and if any other council members have any questions for this panel, please indicate such in the chat feature. One of the issues I've often raised when we've had types of borrowing is what is the diversity of professionals that will be working on these initiatives, either from FA or financial advisors to investment banks to bond counsel. Can you provide some information in that regard?
Absolutely. So our department's goal is 40%. participation, and we, through fiscal year 20, the most recent year completed, were at 53% in terms of professional service contracts, which includes underwriters. In our underwriting pool specifically, 2 of the largest 3 minority-owned firms or women-owned firms are in our top 5, and 3 are in our top 10 frequent underwriters in terms of dollars received through transactions. And so that's incredibly important to us. We'll continue to maintain diverse teams. And if approved, we would put out an RFI. That would be the next step in this process to seek applications and participation interest from firms in our underwriting pools, and also for firms to provide letters of credit for the commercial paper program.
In public finance, traditionally, you have a rotation of different banks and professionals that you use. When was the last time the city updated the rotation in reference to receiving information for various firms to provide aid to the city from public financing perspective?
Sure. So our current underwriting pools expire at the end of June, and so we'll be very shortly issued.
And that's June of 2021, correct?
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so we'll be putting out an RFP for those pools likely this spring.
Okay. And that also pertains to other professionals that you're using as well?
Yes, our bond counsel and disclosure counsel for water and for gas works pools also expire at the end of this current fiscal year, so June 2021. And so we'll also be doing a similar competitive process for those as well.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Dunn, Ms. Labuda. Are there any additional questions for this panel? Okay, thank you all. Seeing none, Mr. Iannuzzi, can you call the next panel of witnesses to testify this afternoon?
Jerry Sweeney, President, CEO, and Trustee of Brandywine Trust. Spear of Easy Inc. Gabe Morgan, Vice President of President and Director of Pennsylvania Delaware, CF32BJ. And Robert Kowalski, President and CEO of Park Corporation.
And I believe there was another witness to testify with Mr. Morgan. She is also checking in, who I believe is from SEIU 32BJ. If we're going to have her testify after Mr. Morgan's testimony, and we'll take testimony based on the order that Mr. Iannuzzi stated. So we'll begin with Mr. Sweeney. Please state your name for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman Green, Vice Chairman Heenan, Council Member Parker, and members of the City Council's Committee on Finance. My name is Jerry Sweeney. I'm President and CEO of Brandywine Realty Trust. And on behalf of Brandywine Realty Trust, thank you for hearing our testimony in support of Bill number 200387, introduced by Council Member Parker. We sincerely thank Council Member Parker for introducing this legislation, and frankly applaud her and her staff for the collaborative process they undertook in preparing for this hearing. Brandywine is currently the 3rd largest private owner of parking spaces in the city of Philadelphia. We recently made the decision to bring all of our parking operations in-house by creating our Bex Park division. Thus, all of our garage personnel are now Brandywine employees and receive the full Brandywine's benefit package. Brandywine strongly believes that Philadelphia can only succeed if more of its citizens get family-sustaining jobs to help them rise above the widespread poverty that has existed in our city for decades. This belief is reflected not just in our relationship with our employees, but also in how we try to engage with our neighbors, community members, and stakeholders throughout Philadelphia. Just several things that Brandywine has launched to accomplish this greater goal. We've launched a construction apprenticeship preparatory program. It's a 15-week training program designed to prepare candidates for the building trades. To date, 57 people have passed those exams and are now working within the construction industry. We also, with the Enterprise Center, established the Grow Philadelphia Capital Fund. That fund, in 2 different tranches, aggregates over $600,000, and over 27 loans have been made to minority-owned businesses in the Philadelphia area to provide them capital to grow and capacity building operations to drive both their growth and the growth of the neighborhoods in which they do business. We also recently committed a $200,000 credit facility to provide loan guarantees to African American Chamber of Commerce member companies whose businesses were impacted by the civil unrest in the commercial corridors like 52nd Street and Lancaster Avenue. Brandywine strongly supports Councilmember Parker's plan to create a good parking jobs review committee, and we would hope to participate, if so selected, to serve on that committee once it's formed. Providing family-sustaining jobs, including strong benefits packages to all of our employees, is a key part of Brandywine's mission. Engaged, motivated, and enthusiastic employees are our company's best assets and drive our success. Low turnover, good pay, solid benefits, career advancement opportunities, and respect for the value that each employee adds are important attributes of anyone's lifestyle and company culture, and frankly, from our standpoint, very smart business. Brandywine has built a long and successful history of working with labor and having collaborated with the SEIU through a similar situation with our cleaning and janitorial workers many years ago. We worked closely with them throughout the entire process and crafted a solution that was a win-win for both our business and for our employees. We believe similar success can be achieved in the Philadelphia parking industry to improve the lives of parking employees, and look forward to once again working with the various stakeholders to achieve a positive outcome for the industry. As the parking industry continues to reckon with the pandemic-related low occupancy and one of the highest parking taxes in the nation, it's imperative that all stakeholders chart a new path forward. Philadelphia must use this moment to rethink its historical approach to the parking business and make our industry more competitive. Only through competitive and sustainability can the parking industry continue to grow good-paying jobs. So thank you again, Councilmember Parker, Chairman Green, Vice Chairman Heenan, and members of the City Council's Committee on Finance for hearing our testimony in support of Bill number 200387 today. We're certainly available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. We'll have all the witnesses testify, and then we'll proceed with questions from members of council. I do not see Robert Zariski here, so we'll go with the next witness, which is Harvey Spear. Then we'll hear from Gabe Morgan, as well as Kai Kia L. And then if Mr. Zariski is here, we'll have him testify, and we'll take questions.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I believe Mr. Zariski is on as Robert Guest.
Okay. All right, so we'll have him. Well, let's go with Harvey Spear, and then we'll identify Mr. Zariski, and then we'll have him testify after Mr. Morgan and Kai Kia L. Mr. Spear, please state your name. I'm sorry, Mr. Spear, please state your name and proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and council members, for letting me testify. My name is Harvey Spear. I'm president of Easy Park. We've been in business close to 50 years now, and just wanted to thank you for giving us an opportunity to give our side of the story with the expenses and the parking tax. We are fourth generation people in our family in the parking business. I have to say that this has been one of the worst years that I've ever seen in this business. We used to worry about a snowstorm losing a week. We lost months of people. We are not considered an essential business, so we were closed for a number of months. We have to let you know that we treat our employees fair. We treat our employees, we consider them the backbone of our business. All of our employees get full benefit package, which includes health insurance, good pay, vacation, sick pay. Every one of them get it in a matter of time. After, I think it's 2 months, they get started. And I'm proud to say that most of our employees have been with us for years. They enjoy their job. It's not an easy job working in the weather and the rain. And I just wanted to bring that up. I have to say, since we've opened up after being closed for a number of months, the best we have now is 20% occupancy. We still have our mortgages. We still have our insurance, which, by the way, increased over time because of the amount of claims because of the pandemic. And we still have claims, and we still have everything that goes along with this. We were lucky enough to borrow money at this time. I have to say, at this point, I can let Rob Zawitsky explain a lot more than I can. You brought friendly competitors together. We've both been in the business for 40, 50 years, and over the years we had our differences, but because of all the problems we had in the industry, we talk almost once a week. So I'd like Rob Zawitsky to continue. Well, first of all, I'd like you to hear from our employees. We have 2 employees, one from Parkway, one from Easy Park, that if you'd allow them to talk, it would take 2 minutes just to explain how they moved up in the company and what they do now. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Spear. I believe those 2 employees are Abu Diari and I believe Charles Newkirk. They are on the next panel.
Okay.
So with that, let's go to Gabe Morgan and Kai Keel L. And we're still trying to confirm that Mr. Zawitsky is here as well. But we'll proceed with Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Councilman Green. And I'd like to thank Councilwoman Parker, for moving this process along and recognizing, the problems that the industry faces. Look, this is an industry that is in real trouble right now, and one we think that is critical to rebuilding. I think is the appropriate way to talk about this. Center City, as Councilperson Dom said, and often you guys have not heard me corroborate things that Councilperson Dom has said. It is a fact that the office buildings, the market in Center City is in a position that we've never seen before. When we, working together with Brandywine and other big building owners, bargained an agreement for 3,000 cleaners in Center City just in October, buildings were at 90% occupancy. They're now down to 15% occupancy. Never seen anything like it. So we really support this, and we support the effort to try and turn this into a sustainable industry. That said, I think it's really important to note a couple other facts. One, although there are good employers in the parking industry, the vast majority of parking workers work for contractors who for years have operated on the basis of bidding contracts at the lowest possible rate, which has driven wages for most parking workers to poverty level wages for a very, very, very long time. And in saying that, I'm certainly not pointing the finger at any individual employer who's involved in this meeting or testified. I'm just simply saying, as a matter of fact, the biggest parking employers and the biggest number of parking employees work for contractors who pay poverty wages without benefits throughout the entire city of Philadelphia. And that an effort to try and rebuild an industry like parking, which again, we think is really critical. Part of the reason to do that, and we argue perhaps the most important reason, is to find a pathway to move those thousands of workers out of poverty. As Jerry pointed out earlier, there are models for doing this in Philadelphia. We've done this with cleaners in Philadelphia, where there are now 3,000 family-sustaining jobs in the contract cleaning industry in and around the exact same geographies we're talking about parking. We did it with security, where there are now 2,000 security officers who have gone from minimum wage jobs to moving out of poverty. Almost the entire industry is now $15 an hour. Not all of it, but almost all of it. And almost all have health insurance, which is something we never had before, very similar to parking. We had a similar effort around contracted workers at the airport, where we still have a way to go. But with working with the city, and many of the folks who are here now, I think actually everyone who's on this call is an elected official, we found a pathway working with the city and the airlines and the contractors to move thousands of workers there out of poverty. We see this as the same. We think it's a really important effort to undertake, and the time to do it couldn't be more urgent than it is right now. And in fact, we would urge council to start understanding that it's going to take a massive effort by the city really to save and preserve the base of FAM-sustaining service sector jobs that it has in and around Center City, and that it's going to be efforts like this that help create a model for how to actually create more FAM-sustaining jobs. So that was a long rant for me. I appreciate your patience, but I think the best person to hear from SEIU is one of our own members who's experienced this industry, and that would be Kaisha.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you for allowing.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Kaya L.
You can proceed with your testimony.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Kaisha L. I've been employed with the parking industry for 2 years now. And when I first came in, it was a little difficult to get the managers and supervisors to be on the same understanding as me, fighting for equality at the job and fighting for better work environments and health insurance and better wages for everyone. But I could say with being with 32BJ and the union, I've experienced one of the best jobs I've had in my life. With this bill, I feel the fight is important because equality is the most important thing amongst us all. It has to be a place and time for everybody to come to an agreement with having a voice. That's basically the outcome of my testimony. Is fairness, and what we're fighting for basically is equality and a good minimum wage. And thank you guys for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you. Thank you for adding your voice to this issue and being with us this afternoon to testify. I believe we also have Robert Zaritsky here as well who would like to testify. Okay, I was informed that Mr. Zaritsky was here. We will try to check back. Are there any questions for this panel by members of council? I think Councilman Parker had some questions.
Thank you, Chairman Green, and thank you to all who testified today. Mr. Chairman, I just want to get on the record that we need to give a special thanks today to members of City Council who shared in the vision of bringing workers along with the industry together to figure out a path forward and how to preserve and enhance the parking industry in Philadelphia. And Mr. Chairman, it could not have been done without the support of our leader, Council President Clark, Council Member Gilmore Richardson, yourself, Mr. Chairman, Council Member Heenan, Gaultier, Thomas, Squilla, Johnson, Sanchez, Brooks, and Jones. And it's important that members of the public get a chance to see, again, for the record, that when we introduced this legislation, we did so immediately in the midst of COVID. At that time, we didn't know what the economic impact the increase of this tax and what it would be like on the city of Philadelphia. As a matter of fact, I would argue that when we did increase the rate from 22 up to 25, we did so anticipating that our increase to the rate would generate revenue to help the city of Philadelphia close what we now learn was a $750 million budget gap. But unfortunately, as I noted in my testimony, that is not what it did. In addition to that, I want to say this. This bill doesn't lower the tax rate to 17% by fiscal year 23. It acknowledges that that is a goal. What this does is simply form the committee with the members appointed by the mayor, as I stated, and we will work together using a collaborative approach with the reduction in the tax being our ultimate goal. With that being said, let me state for the record, and because, you don't often hear us saying this out loud, and that is, I want to thank Jerry Sweeney. I didn't realize it until I listened to your testimony that you were now the third largest owner of parking lots in the city. And so I want to congratulate you on that. And I also want to
Right, thanks.
I also want to thank you for acknowledging some of the other ways that your firm, Brandywine, has attempted to contribute to Philadelphia's economy and helping to broaden the path to ensure that Black and brown people are given opportunities, but not just from the working level as workers, but also the capital needed from small business owners who have often been denied access to capital, no matter how great or innovative the job creation opportunities they sought to implement were. They usually couldn't get access to the capital. So when you are able to tell us about the $200,000 for loan guarantees for small businesses working with the chamber, when you're able to tell us about that $600,000 for minority owned businesses and that partnership with Della Clark at the Enterprise Center, and she's definitely been Philadelphia's leader in hammering home, along with Councilman Green. This has been an issue that he's talked about for many years, about having access to capital. So I want to thank you. I also want to say this to Mr. Morgan, who is with SEIU. Thank you for acknowledging, because it's one thing when we as elected officials hear from the industry that there has been a decrease in the occupancy of buildings. For those who are members of the Philadelphia public who are listening, who are saying, okay, yeah, the buildings were at 90% occupancy pre-COVID, and they're now only occupied by 15%. But what impact does that have, on me? The impact that it has on you is, a reduction in our non-resident wage tax, because those people who are not driving into the city and parking here, they also don't have to pay that non-resident portion of the wage tax. And so all of this is interconnected, Mr. Chairman, and I want to, particularly with the focus being on trying to bring workers out of poverty and using this as a model to demonstrate that, again, workers along with industry can work together to find common ground to move Philadelphia's economy forward. I want to, just for the record, again say thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all members who I noted had the foresight, because people forget that we were really in a frenzy trying to figure out strategies and ways to close that $750 million gap, because help from Washington, D.C. at that time, Washington, D.C.'s funding and all of it that was sent here, it never gave the city of Philadelphia to lose those dollars to replace revenue that we lost as a result of COVID. So we had to be creative and innovative. But out of that challenge, I think this presented an opportunity for us to demonstrate how Philadelphia can work moving forward. And again, we don't have to be pro-worker and anti-business or pro-business and anti-worker. They can be done one and the same, and it would only be possible were it not for the sponsors of this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. I know that Rob Zaritsky actually is here, that he needs to be taken off of mute so he can testify. Also, I know Councilmember Bass had a question and Mr. Spear also had a comment. So if we could take Mr. Zaritsky off mute so he can provide his testimony, then we can hear additional questions from Councilmembers Bass and Gim, and also a comment from Mr. Spear.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Zaritsky.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. Okay, good. If you could state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Sure. Thank you. Robert Zaritsky, President and CEO of Parkway Corporation and President of the Philadelphia Parking Association. I'm speaking in support of Bill 200-387. Before the pandemic began, Philadelphia's economy was doing relatively well. The city's office buildings were seeing higher rents and occupancy. The hospitality industry had ridden a 5-year growth rate and was the envy of most markets in the country. Jobs were increasing and people were moving into the city. So by and large, Philadelphia was on a roll. The parking industry, on the other hand, was in bad shape. Because of Philadelphia's past parking tax increases to 22.5%, and massive real estate and U&O tax increases due to substantial valuation increases on all properties throughout the city, this combined rate was effectively a 45 to 55% of every dollar we charged went directly to the city. I think this is worth repeating because of the 22.5% tax that existed before it was just increased, and the reassessments of 200 to over 300% increases in assessed valuations for most parking properties, it was barely enough money to pay salaries, electric, insurance, capital improvements, rent, and mortgages. And as you know, parking companies are also subject to pay state and federal taxes. So after all of the taxes were done and all the other expenses were paid, there wasn't much left to pay for the parking companies and owners of parking properties to be profitable. So you'll understand why our parking association has been vocal for 14 years about this terrible situation we've been in, and why developers who are removing 1,000 to 2,000 spaces each year for new developments never build public parking back into their buildings. If you need proof of this, you have two developers testifying today. Both Easy Park and Parkway are developers, and as well as Brandywine Realty Trust. You have three, actually. And I will tell you that there's almost no public parking that is being built back into developments now. What will this mean for the city going forward? More shortages of parking supply in many parts of the city, fewer parking jobs in the city, and less room for advancement as companies shrink in size. There'll be less tax revenues generated from parking and businesses who depend on parking. The difficult condition for Philadelphia's parking industry was in place before the pandemic. Now with reduced office space occupancy and usage, little or no tourism activity, the weather turning colder and impacting outdoor dining, the demand for parking in the city will not recover for a long time. Without a robust parking industry, it is extremely difficult to help the city's service sector economy recover. The parking industry traditionally has been a great place to make a career. Many people start out working in our industry, love it, and work decades parking cars. Others have moved from parking cars to accounting, IT, and HR positions within the industry, while others climb the ladder of leadership to manage multiple facilities or even entire cities. Years ago, there were as many as 4,000 jobs in the parking industry. More recently, we've counted, and due to technology changes, continually increasing taxes, and an enormous elimination of parking facilities, we counted only between 2,000 and 2,500 jobs. And the current lack of public parking demand due to the COVID pandemic has dramatically reduced our employee numbers. With the parking industry in Philadelphia already on its knees before the pandemic, and now with revenues cut 50 to 80%, the word desperate is the only way to describe us. However, I believe we have an opportunity to work together to create a world-class mobility hub in Philadelphia. Mobility is changing in the country and in the world, and parking is going to play a very important role in this as the last mile transportation, incorporating electric vehicles, car sharing, bike sharing, scooter sharing, and all sorts of other things. And there are areas that we can work together. The state and the city are behind in a couple of areas, especially with electric vehicles. It's illegal to charge for electricity if you have a charging station existing in your facility now. This is counter to everything where science is going and electric vehicles are doing. So it's just one example of how maybe this review committee can work on a lot of things for the industry, which can help generate more jobs and more opportunities for the parking industry. So to conclude, I think this is a good thing that we're working together, and hopefully some really positive things can come out of this to help the city and the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zaritsky, for your testimony. We'll take some questions from members of council, and then we'll go back to Mr. Spear, who has a point he would like to make. Council Member Bass, and then followed by Council Member Ginn.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to everyone on the panel. I want to thank you all for your testimony today, and I want to applaud everyone for a willingness to work together to solve the problems and address the issues that we have, and also specifically SEIU and the work that you all are doing to help organize in this matter, because it makes a difference. We all know it makes a difference. My question is, and anyone on the panel who feels comfortable can answer this. My question is, can you talk a little bit about what the total universe of affected workers are when we talk about workers' benefits? Because this is all related to what the profitability, I guess, of the industry is. But I know that pretty much most of the folks on this call offer working, a living wage and benefits and, the things that folks need to be able to support themselves and support their families. But I was wondering if someone could talk about what percentage of the industry in Philadelphia is not leading by this example, and how big is the scope of the problem? So that's my question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Bass. Anyone from the panel would like to answer that question?
Rob, I'm happy to give one word view on it, but if you want to give yours first, or I'll go second. I'm sure we have slightly different views on this question.
The question is how many people are getting benefits?
The question is, in the overall parking industry in the city of Philadelphia, how many I hate to say good guys versus not so good guys, but how many folks are offering benefits, offering living wages versus not offering these very important staples that people need to be able to support themselves and their families?
We do not have data on every single parking company. I can tell you that my company, Parkway,
roughly.
It's hard to say. We were actually shocked. I think SEIU did a survey or did a study and found that some of the hospital valet operations, these giant operations, they were actually paying people minimum wage or really, really low wages. I was actually shocked to hear that they could even hire people, at minimum wage. And I don't know if it addressed, benefits. I can tell you that, a lot of the larger companies, I think everybody on the call today, Brandywine and Easy Park and Parkway, all do, I believe, pay good wages and also benefits. So I think it's a minority of companies that are, may not be doing that. But I don't know the practices of every competitor in the industry. It's not something that we have looked at.
So, Councilman, I think Rob and I in the industry have had a lot of different conversations about this. I'll just tell you how SEIU sees the data, and then so we have surveyed and talked to workers at most of the locations across the city. We think that, pre-COVID, so these numbers may be different now, but there was something somewhere between 2,000 to 2,600 parking workers in the city, that the majority of those actual workers are working at places like the hospitals, the universities, the stadiums, that the majority of employers, at least as measured by employees, which would be different. I think that, as Rob's represented, I think that Parkway and Mr. Spear's company pay more than what we would call what the industry pays, because we would measure that by what a majority of workers actually make. And what we would call the majority of the industry, these have been jobs where people are making, poverty level wages. And if benefits were offered, they're benefits they could not afford because of how high the monthly premiums are. I'm not saying that to be a reflection of what Mr. Zawitsky or Mr. Spear's company is. I think council has to remember that just like most of the service sector, the biggest employers are actually national and in some cases multinational contractors who are then hired by owners and bid on the work. So a HUP or a CHOP or the Eagles or Temple or Penn are really the ones who control the cost by how they place a bid. And so if they say, I think of a company like Parkway, this is pure speculation, were to go in and try and bid on any of those huge accounts and suggest that they should get paid the same thing that Parkway may pay someone in a lot that they own. What they find is that they're not competitive because there's plenty of companies that are willing to pay people as little as humanly possible and treat them however they can, and have turned that into a national or multinational business. So the industry has a way to go, in our view. But that being said, what does seem really clear to us is there are local actors like Mr. Zawitsky and Mr. Spear who have I guess we would call a more enlightened worldview on what to do with workers. As other folks have commented, and we have our city where the largest single commercial real estate owner, Brandywine, has a long track record of actually working and leading that industry to try and take an entire market and transform the industry of service sector jobs into good jobs by using whatever role it can play as leaders in that. We believe we can get there, but it's a long way to go from most workers in the parking industry. And that's just, I think that's factually true if you measure it by workers, how many workers work where and do what.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Real quick, concerning that question, Mr. Spear, if you want to add your context to that question that Councilmember Bass asked, I also know you want to raise another point. So you two points at once.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I raised my hand because I got in touch with Zaritsky and Robert Zaritsky. But as far as the question that you just asked, I can tell you, just as the Gabe said, that we pay more than most parking companies. And one of the reasons is that we're a local company. We care about our employees. They've been here for years, and we do give full benefits. We don't pay partial health benefits. We pay the full benefit. And we pay the other, as I said, the insurance and vacations and sick pay. However, I can tell you this, we are not at liberty to ask anything about wages or prices of other companies because it can be considered collusion. So we don't ask whether they pay high wages, whether they pay what their rates are, or any of that. We just know in our business that we want to keep our employees happy. And as the union said, they've been around, they know what we pay, they know how we treat our employees. So just wanted to let you know that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add some context to the general universe of, those who are doing what needs to be done and those who, need a little nudging along, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Councilmember Gim and then Councilmember Heenan. Okay, we'll give Councilmember Gim a few moments. Councilmember Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to tell you, this conversation that we're having here publicly has been long overdue. And, we've been individually and independently of each other as council members over the years have had these conversations. So I want to thank, the sponsor of this bill and pushing this legislation and, the attempt to put together a collective to address issues. I mean, you have the leaders in the industry, who are locally, and to expand on what Gabe had talked about, we have all these independent contractors, that are in this city, that is a part of the underground economy that doesn't pay taxes, doesn't pay fair wages, and I hope that the committee, task force, once it's created, can take a look and letting the end users know that in Philadelphia, that this is not a race to the bottom, and not at the workers' expense. And here you have the top industry leaders talking about parking and talking a lot more than parking, along with people who represent people for a living and care about workers together in the same kind of spirit that we have never had before. So it is my hope that we really move forward with these conversations and produce something tangible that'll make the city proud, proud of its workers, proud of its people in business, and send a message to the end users and these national companies that that's not how we do business in the city of Philadelphia. People pay their taxes, people pay fair wages, and people deserve to be represented if they choose to be, which I fully support. So this conversation at large will continue. I know Jerry Sweeney is a participant. This is a start that the pandemic has shown us all, that there's a broader tax conversation that we should be talking about at some point this year, going into next year, for all the right reasons, for Philadelphians, for businesses that want to stay here, grow here, and businesses that want to treat their employees with dignity and respect for a future. So I am very excited about this conversation and fully look forward to continue and engage in the conversation moving forward. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing this thing through City Council.
Thank you, Councilmember Heenan. I'd like to recognize Councilmember Maria Aquino Sanchez, and then if Councilmember Gim is back, we'll have her ask her question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the bill sponsor and the industry folks who've worked with this bill sponsor around this process. I also want to kind of amplify the message around when we have national, multinational companies who can hide their profit, hide their practices from the city of Philadelphia. And all of you know that for the last 13 years, I've been on this about how do we allow multinationals to come in and not only create an unfair business environment, but then we end up penalizing our local good actors who believe in the city or who are here because they want to be versus these multinationals who just come in when an opportunity arises. And so one of the things that I want to encourage and put on the record that at least from the administrative side of this is that we really do look at some of these tax receipts. Harvey mentioned that they can't really ask each other because it would be collusion, but I think our finance team, definitely our revenue department, can look and you could really see and drill down on what kind of taxes these companies actually pay, and that we create a fair environment as part of this work, and really looking at how do we close some of these profit loopholes and others that allow these big actors to come in. There's no reason why we need these big multinationals. They've been problematic at the airport. They're problematic in this industry. And I think it's within us all to be able to come up with the right balance of tax mix. So if you're going to do business in our market, you pay and that you're a good actor, and that we incentivize the folks that are Philly-based, locally based, headquarters here, and love this city like we do and are prepared when necessary to pay and support, but shouldn't be penalized for the fact that they're located here. So thank you to all the folks working on this. I look forward to the ongoing work in this, but let's look at it through that lens. Let's really level out the playing field and incentivize Philadelphia-based businesses. Thank you. So they can take care of Philadelphia workers, by the way, which in this case, this particular industry has taught and informed this council about what the work that needs to be done around living wage and really uplifting Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez. Councilmember Gim. Okay. Are there any other questions for this panel?
Mr. Chairman, if I can just have a closing statement. I would like to, just for the record, to thank Councilwoman Bass for flushing out the total universe that we heard from Gabe relative to the 2,000 to 2,600 workers. I also want to thank Councilman Heenan for clearly describing that race to the bottom, and Councilwoman Sanchez for again talking about how we are impacted by those multinational firms that Gabe mentioned. We want to note for the record that, again, once this group has been appointed by the mayor, we want to rest assured that that is the reason why it is constructed the way it is, to ensure that workers, industry, city administration, and council are at the table. And I want to ensure Philadelphians that that issue relative to tax fraud and wage theft, with many of the very creative and innovative ways that we've seen these firms, again, who are not a part of what I call the home team, right? So Brandywine, Zaritsky, Spear, they are a part of what I refer to as the home team. Rest assured, when we get to the table to figure out how we can find a way to incentivize the industry and grow jobs at the same time, part of the way we're going to have to do that is to find a way to ensure that the bad actors aren't benefiting from the incentives that we're trying to provide to the home team, so that we can all grow and thrive. So once again, I think the comments, Mr. Chairman, that we've heard today from members of council indicate that we are clearly on on the right track, and they want to make sure that as we work on this issue, we get to the meat of the matter. We want to make the environment better for the home team, but we are not going to forget about the tax fraud and the wage theft that many of these other firms participate in on a daily basis. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. Let's move on to panel number 3. We'll hear from Charles Newkirk and Abu Diori. I think the sentiments made by members of council are so true. See both labor and business working collectively together to support both their companies as well as their members is so important, especially based on the fact that these are companies who are located here in the city of Philadelphia, employing Philadelphia residents, trying to grow an industry at a time that we're having such a challenging global pandemic, but also economic crisis that's crippled the entire world, but also more specifically our local economy in our core of our city. With that, I would like to start with the next panel. Charles Newkirk.
Hi, good afternoon, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Newkirk. If you could just state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, and then we'll have Mr. Diori follow you.
Sure. My name is Charles Newkirk, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me to make comments on this bill. I am one of those individuals that Rob Zaritsky was talking about, as I've worked for Parkway for over 4 decades. And during my time with Parkway, I'm proud to say that I progressed through the ranks, starting out as a parking attendant and then through many other positions, and now I am the director of operations. During my time with Parkway, I'd like to say that I worked at some of the most prestigious locations throughout the city, at the Four Seasons Hotel, managing their parking and valet operations, at the train station, running their massive parking operation, and then the dispatch, taxi dispatch, and at the airport. That's just to name a few. But the thing that I think is most important for me to try to say is that this industry has allowed me to provide for my family, to provide college educations for my children, purchase a home, travel. And, I'm proud to also say that, I currently still reside in the North Philadelphia neighborhood of the city. I've worked with and managed, over 1,000 good people, during my time with Parkway. And I would say many of them are long-term employees like myself. There's others that moved into other areas of the company, and there's also a lot that moved on away from the company. But they use this industry as a stepping stone to allow them to achieve their goals and aspirations in life. I mean, that's one of the things about this industry. People, can make a living, or they can just use it, to get where they ultimately want to be. This industry, I had opportunities to move into other areas during my time, but I decided to stay with Parkway. It's a good company. They definitely look out for their employees. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been here so long. And I can't speak for other parking companies, but I know my decision was a good one. And then lastly, even now, I would just like to say that, I oversee a team of over 100 people directly, and I know for a fact that they all have a good living wage, and it's because of this industry. So with that, I just want to say thank you for allowing me the time to provide my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Newkirk. We'll now hear from Mr. Abu Diori. Okay, I did see Mr. Diori earlier, so we'll check now. Mr. Diori, if you would like to testify, please take yourself off mute so you can proceed with your testimony.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. It's a little muffled, but if you could state your name and then proceed with your testimony for the hearing.
Okay, my name is Abu Diori, and I have worked for the parking industry for over a decade. And then I have worked for EV Park for over 6 years. The 100+ employees that work under my management reside in the city and reflect the makeup of Philadelphia. Because of this industry, these employees are able to make a living and make a living for themselves with the wages earned as an attendant. As an attendant myself, I seen Easy Park grow and become an establishment through the city. I started as an attendant and worked my way up to management, and I have seen many employees remain with Easy Park through this time and grow with me and the company. It's essential that the industry is relieved of such high parking tax and bill. Number 200387 is considered and passed. If this bill isn't passed, our employee will be negatively impacted as costs increase, demand of parking will subside. Without sufficient cash flow to compensate for the expenses to operate in the industry, this will make it difficult for EV Park to retain a place of employment for its workers. As the parking industry stabilizes workers will be positively impacted, ensuring the costs in the industry remain reasonable. It allows us to provide a safe and stable environment for our employees, such as in turn allow the livelihood of the city to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diori, for your testimony, as well as Mr. Newkirk. Thank you for providing your voice to this issue and this conversation. Are there any questions from members of council to this panel? Okay, seeing none, are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay, are there any other people from the public that are here that would like to testify on any of the bills that are here in this Finance Committee this afternoon? Okay, hearing none. I want to thank all the panels and witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions. I now invite all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from this meeting before we go into our public meeting. We'll now pause the proceedings briefly as multiple participants leave the hearing. Okay, once again, we're going to invite all the panels and witnesses to disconnect from the meeting so that council can go into our public meeting. This concludes the public hearing of the Finance Committee. We will now go into a public meeting to consider action to be taken on the bills before this committee. Mr. Iannuzzi, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate that you are present when your name is called, and say a few words so that your image could be so pleasantly be displayed on screen when you speak.
Councilmember Bass.
Good afternoon. I am still present. Thank you.
Councilmember Dom.
Good afternoon, Chairman Green and colleagues still present.
Councilmember Gim.
Good afternoon. I'm present. I'm sorry I was out a little bit earlier.
Councilmember Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Parker.
Present.
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez. And Councilmember Squilla.
I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Iannuzzi. I will now go into the public meeting. I recognize Councilmember Heenan for a motion on bill number 200387.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 200387 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at our next session of council.
Thank you, Councilmember Heenan. It has been moved and properly seconded that bill number 200387 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed?
Councilmember Green, just want to recuse myself. It's Alan Dom.
Noted for the record that Councilmember Dom has recused himself from voting on bill number 200387. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Chair recognizes Councilmember Heenan for a motion on bill number 200599.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If before I make the motion, can you make sure that we note for the record who is seconding the bills as the motion is made moving forward? So I thank you. I move that bill number 200599 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council.
Second.
Second.
Okay, who was the first seconded?
Squilla.
I think that was me. Oh, Cindy, or
Okay.
one of us.
Either one.
Okay, Councilmember Cindy Bass has seconded the motion from Councilmember Heenan on bill number 200599. It has been moved and properly seconded that this bill, number 200599, be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Chair recognizes Councilmember Heenan for a motion on bill number 200600.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that bill number 200600 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit the first reading of this bill at our next session of council.
Second.
I believe that was Councilmember Bass.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Bass has seconded Councilmember Heenan's motion on bill number 200600. It has been moved and probably seconded that this bill, number 200600, be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it and the motion carries. This concludes the business before the Committee on Finance today. I'm hearing no other business and seeing no other business. I want to thank you all for your attendance for today's hearing, and enjoy the remainder of your day.
Thank you. Good job.
All right. Thank you all.